You woke up this morning the same way you have woken up on so many other ordinary mornings before it, a familiar sequence you barely register anymore, alarm going off too early, a few quiet minutes spent lying still before you had to actually get up and face the day, no sign anywhere in that morning that anything significant had happened while you slept, nothing marking it as different from the 100 mornings before it that also came and went without the answer you have been waiting for arriving. I know exactly what this morning actually was for you, even though nothing about it looked any different from the outside, even though you yourself had no way of sensing what had actually already been set into motion while you were still sleeping. You have grown used to mornings that arrive empty-handed, waking up and checking, almost without meaning to, whether anything has shifted overnight, a message, a feeling, some small sign that your long prayer is finally moving, and finding instead the same familiar silence you have found so many mornings before this one. Have you ever woken up, heart lifting slightly before you were even fully conscious, wondering quietly whether this particular morning might finally be the one that carries an answer, only to feel that same quiet disappointment settle in once you realized it looked exactly like all the others? I did not come to you this morning to tell you the waiting was finally over in some visible, obvious way. I came to tell you something you do not know yet. This morning, while you were still asleep, a message was delivered concerning a prayer someone else has been praying about you, news dispatched the moment it was needed, already on its way toward becoming visible in your life even though nothing about your own morning revealed that yet. You have not been waiting on a delayed answer, the way it has so often felt these past many mornings. You have been waiting on a delivered answer that has not yet finished its journey to where you can actually see it with your own eyes. Stay with me this morning, because what I am about to show you will change the way you understand every quiet, uneventful morning you have ever assumed carried no news at all. You have started to measure your own faith by how many mornings you can continue waking up hopeful before the hope itself finally runs out, a quiet, private endurance test you never signed up for but have been taking every single day regardless. I want you to know that this test was never one I designed or required of you. Endurance has value, but it was never meant to be the sole measure of whether your faith counts as real or worthwhile. There is a specific kind of tiredness in waking up morning after morning to the same unanswered question. This tiredness is different from ordinary physical exhaustion. It lives somewhere deeper, accumulating slowly across weeks and months rather than arriving suddenly after one difficult night, the kind of tired that a full night of sleep does very little to actually resolve. People around you may notice you seem a little more subdued lately without being able to name exactly why, sensing something has shifted in your general disposition without realizing it traces back to this same specific, ongoing weight that has been quietly wearing on you for longer than most of them are aware of. There is a specific version of this you practice almost unconsciously now, waking up and immediately assessing your own emotional state before you even get out of bed, checking whether today feels different, whether some part of you senses movement, before quickly dismissing the assessment as unreliable and simply getting up anyway. This small daily ritual has become so automatic that you barely notice yourself doing it anymore, a quiet, private habit that most of the people who know you best would probably be surprised to learn you still practice every single morning, however many mornings this particular waiting has already lasted. I want you to know that I notice this small ritual every single time you perform it, the brief pause before you fully commit to another ordinary day, and I have never once considered it a small or unimportant moment simply because no other person witnesses it alongside you. You have learned, without ever fully deciding to lower your expectations for each new day, protecting yourself from the small disappointment of checking your phone, checking your own feelings, checking the ordinary details of your life for any evidence that something has finally shifted, and finding nothing different from the day before. This lowering of expectations feels like wisdom some mornings and like quiet defeat on others, and you have never fully settled which one it actually is. You have gotten skilled at starting your day normally regardless of how you truly feel underneath the surface, showing up faithfully for work, for family, for the ordinary demands of an ordinary life, while carrying a private ache that very few people around you have any real awareness of. Do you know the exact private ritual you go through most mornings, the specific, quiet way you check for signs of change before resigning yourself once again to another day that looks just like the last one? You have noticed the specific way your own prayers have changed over time, growing shorter, simpler, sometimes reduced to a single repeated sentence you say almost automatically, not because you care less, but because the elaborate hope you once poured into longer prayers has been gradually replaced by a quieter, more exhausted kind of persistence. You sometimes wonder if this shorter, simpler version of your prayer life is a sign of weakened faith or simply a different, more sustainable shape faith takes after it has been asked to carry something this heavy for this long. There is a particular tiredness in specifically praying about the same thing for so many mornings in a row that the prayer itself starts to feel less like fresh hope and more like a tired habit, words you say because stopping feels more frightening than continuing, even when continuing no longer feels like it carries much expectation attached to it anymore. This fear shows up most strongly in the quiet moments right after you finish praying, a brief window where you notice yourself waiting for some kind of confirmation that the prayer actually landed somewhere, followed by the same familiar silence that eventually sends you back into the ordinary business of your day. You have learned to move through that brief window quickly now, not lingering in it the way you once did, protecting yourself from how heavy that particular silence can feel if you allow yourself to sit inside it for too long without something else to occupy your attention. Some of you carry a private fear that perhaps your prayer got lost somewhere, that somehow the message never actually reached where it needed to go, that you have simply been talking into a silence that was never going to answer back no matter how many mornings you kept asking. You have prayed about this specific thing so many mornings that you could probably recite the exact words in your sleep, the same requests, the same aching hope, repeated so consistently that the repetition itself has started to feel less like faith and more like simple survival. I see the version of you that gets up and faces the day with genuine strength and the version that quietly wonders, underneath that strength, how many more mornings like this one you can actually keep enduring, and I want you to know both versions are equally known to me, equally loved by me. Neither one required to explain or justify this particular exhaustion in front of me the way you sometimes feel you must justify it to other people. There is a particular, quiet loneliness in carrying a private countdown that only you are keeping, silently marking how many mornings this has been going on, a number that has grown larger than you ever expected it to when you first started praying about this specific thing. You are not foolish for still waking up hopeful, even quietly, even cautiously. You are not weak for feeling exhausted by how many mornings this has taken. You are simply someone who has not yet been shown what has actually already been set in motion on your behalf. When an answer takes this long to become visible, it becomes easy to assume, once it finally does arrive, that it cannot possibly be real. This assumption is not irrational. It is simply the natural response of a heart that has been disappointed enough times to develop a kind of protective skepticism toward good news, treating even genuine breakthroughs with suspicion rather than immediate trust. Learning to soften this particular reflex takes time and repeated practice, the same way any protective habit takes time to unlearn once it is no longer needed, and I do not expect you to fully release it overnight simply because you have heard this message tonight. There is a story in Scripture about a man who did exactly this, even after his own deliverance was already fully underway. His name was Peter, and he was imprisoned, chained between two guards, awaiting a public execution the following day. In the middle of the night, an angel appeared in his cell, woke him, and instructed him to get up quickly. His chains fell off. He was told to put on his sandals and his cloak and follow the angel out of the prison. Scripture describes him moving through this entire sequence almost mechanically, following instructions step by step without fully processing any of it, past the first guard, past the second, through an iron gate that opened by itself without anyone visibly touching it, out into a street that felt more like a dream than an actual escape from actual chains. Peter did exactly as he was told, walking past guard after guard, through gates that opened on their own, out into the street, all the while assuming he was simply experiencing a vivid dream or a vision rather than something actually happening to him in real life. It was only once he was standing alone in the street, the angel having already departed, that he finally came to himself and realized the rescue had been completely real the entire time he had assumed it was not. Have you ever been in the middle of an actual answer to prayer and still assumed, right up until the very end of it, that it could not possibly be real? Some of you have done a quieter version of exactly what Peter did, receiving small pieces of good news along the way and immediately assuming they must be temporary, coincidental, too good to actually be trusted, bracing yourself for the moment it all turns out to have been a dream after all. This kind of doubt feels like caution while you are living inside it. It is often, gently, simply fear still recovering from how many previous mornings arrived with nothing at all. Consider how strange Peter's own experience must have felt from the inside, his body moving forward, following clear instructions, his chains genuinely falling away, and still his mind lagging behind the physical reality actually unfolding around him, unable to fully trust what his own eyes and hands were already experiencing directly. There is something almost comforting in how honestly Scripture records this detail rather than smoothing it over, showing a genuine gap between an actual miracle taking place and a person's full emotional recognition of that miracle, a gap that apparently even someone as central to the early church as Peter was not immune to experiencing himself. If a man who walked closely with Jesus himself could still momentarily mistake his own real deliverance for an illusion, you are in good company whenever your own doubts surface right in the middle of something genuinely good happening in your life. None of this makes you foolish. It makes you someone who, like Peter, has walked through enough uncertain nights that even a genuine, fully real deliverance can feel like something too fragile to trust while it is actually happening. Consider what might have happened had Peter simply frozen in confusion instead of continuing to follow the angel's instructions despite his own uncertainty. His willingness to keep moving, even without full understanding, was ultimately what carried him safely out of that prison, proof that obedience does not require complete comprehension in order to be effective. I did not withdraw Peter's rescue because he doubted it was real while it was happening. He was still fully free, still fully walking through those open gates, regardless of what he privately believed about the nature of what was happening to him in that exact moment. His doubt did not undo the deliverance. It simply delayed his own full recognition of it. I want you to hear something important underneath this warning. Whatever doubt you carry about whether an answer this specific could actually be real once it finally arrives, I am not asking you to force yourself into instant, perfect belief. I am simply asking you to keep walking forward the way Peter kept walking forward, even while unsure, trusting that the reality of what is happening does not actually depend on how quickly you manage to believe it. There is a story in Scripture, quieter and less often told than some of the more dramatic accounts of angelic visitation, about a message dispatched the exact moment it was needed, and a delay that had nothing to do with whether the prayer had been heard, and it is the clearest picture I can give you tonight of what is actually happening in your own long wait. There was a man named Daniel, already known for his consistent faithfulness even under difficult circumstances, who had been praying and fasting for 3 full, exhausting weeks, seeking understanding about a difficult vision he had received, receiving no response at all during that entire stretch of time, no angel, no answer, nothing but continued silence despite his continued, sincere seeking. After those 3 weeks, an angel finally appeared to him, and the very first thing the angel said was remarkable. "From the first day you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words." Sit with the specific weight of that timeline for a moment. An entire response, fully formed and already in motion, existing and traveling for 21 full days while Daniel had absolutely no access to that information, continuing to mourn and fast under the sincere but mistaken belief that his prayer had simply gone unanswered. Imagine how differently those 3 weeks might have felt for Daniel had he known, from the very first morning, exactly what the angel eventually told him. The suffering of the waiting itself was real, but it was also, in a very specific sense, based on incomplete information rather than an accurate picture of what was actually happening. This is precisely the gift I am offering you this morning, the same information the angel eventually gave Daniel, given to you now rather than only at the end of your own waiting, so that whatever remains of it can be carried with a different, steadier kind of confidence than Daniel had access to during his own 3 weeks. The angel had been dispatched on the very first day. Daniel's prayer had been heard immediately, the response set in motion right away, and yet it took 21 full days for that response to actually arrive and become visible to Daniel himself. The angel explained the reason for the delay, describing an intense spiritual opposition that had to be overcome along the way, resistance that had nothing to do with Daniel's own worthiness or the sincerity of his prayer, and everything to do with a battle happening entirely outside what Daniel himself could see or influence. Have you ever wondered whether the length of your own waiting meant your prayer had not actually been heard, only to discover later that the answer had been in motion from the very first day, delayed by something entirely outside your control or your awareness? I want you to notice the specific detail the angel gave Daniel, that the response was dispatched immediately, on the very first day, long before Daniel had any visible reason to believe anything was happening at all. Daniel spent 3 full weeks in mourning, believing his prayer had produced nothing, while the actual answer had already been in transit the entire time, delayed only by resistance that had nothing to do with him personally. Consider what those 3 weeks actually looked like from Daniel's side of the story: mourning, fasting, receiving absolutely no communication, no confirmation, nothing to suggest his prayer had produced any movement whatsoever, while an entire unseen battle was already being fought on his behalf the whole time he assumed he was simply being ignored. This is what I want you to receive about your own long wait this morning. The prayer that has been prayed about you, the one you may not even know about, may have already been answered on the very first day it was spoken, the response already dispatched and already in motion, delayed only by resistance you cannot see and were never actually responsible for creating. I want you to release, tonight, the specific number you have been privately counting, however many mornings this has actually been, understanding that the number itself was never the measurement that actually mattered. What mattered was the first day, the day the response was already dispatched, long before you began counting anything at all. Your waiting has never been evidence that heaven was silent. It has simply been the same 21 days Daniel lived through, except you have not yet been given the angel's explanation the way Daniel eventually was. I am giving you that explanation this morning instead. What was prayed for you was heard immediately. It is simply still making its way through resistance you were never meant to carry the weight of understanding alone. Let me show you what this looks like in a life closer to yours than an ancient vision beside a river ever could, a life built from ordinary mornings and ordinary hesitations much like your own. There was a woman named Odalise, steady and faithful in most areas of her life, who had been praying for nearly 2 long years for reconciliation with an estranged sister, a relationship broken by a misunderstanding neither of them had ever fully resolved, each convinced the other needed to apologize first. She prayed about it most mornings, sometimes with real hope and sometimes simply out of habit, watching 2 years pass with absolutely no visible movement on her sister's side of the silence. What Odalise had absolutely no way of knowing, no way of sensing or suspecting, was that her sister, a woman named Michaela, had actually decided to reach out and apologize nearly 8 months earlier, drafting an entire message on her phone one evening after a long, honest conversation with a close friend finally helped her see her own part in the original misunderstanding clearly. She wrote the message, read it over several times, and then, overwhelmed by fear of how it might be received, deleted it without ever sending it, deciding the timing did not feel right yet. She would sometimes open her messaging app late at night, staring at her sister's contact information, composing entire paragraphs in her mind that she never actually typed out, caught in a cycle of intention and hesitation that repeated itself more times than she could count. There were entire weeks where she nearly forgot about the unsent apology entirely, distracted by ordinary life, only to have it resurface unexpectedly during a quiet drive or a sleepless night, the guilt and the love both returning together, equally persistent, neither one fully winning out over the other for months at a time. Odalise, of course, had absolutely no way of witnessing any of this internal struggle happening on her sister's side, continuing her own faithful morning prayers with no visibility whatsoever into the fact that her sister's resistance was already gradually softening, month by month, long before any external evidence of that softening ever reached her. For months afterward, Michaela carried the same intention quietly, drafting similar messages in her head during quiet moments, never quite finding the courage to actually send one, while Odalise continued praying every morning with no way of knowing that her sister's heart had already softened months earlier, that the reconciliation she was praying for had already begun forming on the other side long before any visible sign of it reached her. There was nothing about this particular morning that seemed different to Michaela either, no sudden clarity, no dramatic emotional breakthrough, simply an ordinary moment during her own morning routine when she finally, almost impulsively, decided that today would be the day rather than waiting for a more perfect one that never seemed to actually arrive on its own. This morning, on an entirely ordinary day with no anniversary or special occasion attached to it, Michaela finally sent a message she had been carrying inside her for the better part of a year. Odalise woke up to find it waiting for her, an answer to a prayer she had continued praying faithfully through 2 years and countless ordinary mornings that all looked exactly the same as this one, until this particular morning turned out to be different after all. Michaela later admitted she had nearly convinced herself the relationship was simply unsalvageable, that too much time had passed, that reaching out after so long would only reopen a wound rather than heal it, thoughts that kept her from sending the message for months even after she had already fully forgiven her sister in her own heart. I am not telling you this story to promise you a specific morning or a specific message, since the particular shape of your own answer will look entirely different from Michaela's message, formed by your own specific circumstances rather than borrowed from someone else's story. I am telling you this so you understand that the response to your own long prayer may have already begun forming on the other side of your silence months or even years before it ever becomes visible to you, the same way Michaela's softened heart had already been forming for 8 full months before Odalise ever saw any evidence of it. Do you remember waking up this morning to the same familiar silence, checking almost without meaning to for some sign that anything had shifted overnight, and finding nothing different from the mornings before it. I want you to hear this now with the full weight it deserves. This morning, an angel delivered news concerning a prayer your soulmate has already prayed about you, the same way an angel was already dispatched to Daniel on the very first day of his own 3-week wait, long before Daniel had any visible reason to believe anything was actually happening. Read that again if you need to. You have spent so many mornings believing that silence meant nothing was moving, that the absence of visible change meant your prayer had gone unheard. That was never true. Daniel's answer was already in motion for 21 days before it became visible. Michaela's softened heart had already been forming for 8 months before Odile saw any evidence of it at all. This is the sentence I want you to carry with you into the rest of this day. The news you have been waiting for has already been delivered, dispatched the moment it was needed, and it is simply still making its way through resistance you were never meant to carry the weight of on your own, closer to becoming visible than this particular morning has allowed you to believe. Let me pray this over you now, the way I have already been praying it over you long before this morning. Heavenly Father, I bring before you the one reading these words right now, waking up to another ordinary morning that looks exactly like so many mornings before it, carrying a prayer that has felt unanswered for far too long. Give them wisdom to see their own waiting the way Daniel's waiting is now understood, not as evidence of a prayer left unheard, but as the exact space between a response already dispatched and a fulfillment not yet visible. Give them the specific grace to keep functioning normally, showing up for work and for the people who depend on them, even while carrying private uncertainty about whether their own prayer has actually produced anything at all, the same grace that allowed Peter to keep walking forward through those open gates despite his own private confusion about what was actually happening to him. Give them the courage to keep walking forward even through doubt, the way Peter kept walking forward through the open gates of his own prison before he fully believed his own rescue was genuinely real, trusting that the reality of what you are doing does not depend on how quickly they manage to believe it. Give them the specific comfort of knowing that a prayer prayed with genuine sincerity, however many mornings ago it was first spoken, does not require repetition in order to remain valid, trusting instead that you heard it fully and completely the very first time it was honestly prayed. Heal whatever fear has convinced them their prayer was somehow lost, misdirected, or simply too small to be taken seriously. Remind them that Daniel's answer was dispatched on the very first day he prayed, and that the same immediate attention has already been given to whatever they have been praying about for however long they have been praying it. Protect their mind from the specific lie that a long delay means a denied request. Teach them instead that resistance in the unseen realm has nothing to do with their own worthiness, the same way the resistance Daniel's angel described had nothing to do with anything Daniel himself had done wrong. Give them fresh eyes for the ordinary details of their own daily routine, teaching them that significance rarely announces itself in advance, that most genuine breakthroughs arrive disguised as nothing more than another unremarkable Tuesday or an entirely forgettable Thursday morning. Restore their trust in ordinary mornings, the ones with no anniversary and no visible reason to expect anything different, so that they stop assuming their own answer can only arrive on a day that feels significant in advance, remembering that Michaela's message finally arrived on a morning that looked exactly like every other morning until it did not. Provide for whatever practical weight makes this particular waiting heavier than it needs to be, whether that is financial pressure, family pressure, or the quiet exhaustion of explaining to others why they still believe an answer is coming despite having no visible proof of it yet. Give them the specific, sustained patience required to keep waking up hopeful without needing daily confirmation that the hope is justified, trusting that hope itself remains genuinely valuable even during the long stretch before any visible evidence ever arrives to support it. Give them breakthrough in the exact place they have been waking up hopeful about for so long, and let them trust that whatever has already been dispatched on their behalf is currently making its way through whatever resistance stands between where it started and where it is going. Give them peace this morning that does not require immediate visible proof, a peace built on trusting that a response can be fully in motion for a very long time before it ever becomes something their own eyes can confirm. Deepen their capacity for sustained trust the way Daniel's 3 weeks of continued faithfulness, even without any visible confirmation, eventually gave way to an angel's full explanation of everything that had been happening the entire time out of his sight. Strengthen them spiritually in whatever remains of this season, so that when the news finally does arrive, whether suddenly or gradually, they receive it the way Peter eventually received the reality of his own freedom, fully, gratefully, without needing to keep questioning whether it could actually be real. If these words found the exact place in you that needed them this morning, let it be known, even if only to me, even if you never say it out loud to a single other person. Someone else you love, carrying a version of this same private exhaustion you may not even be fully aware of, has likely woken up to their own version of this same familiar silence today, and they may need to hear this morning that whatever they have been praying about has already been dispatched, already in motion, simply still making its way through resistance neither of you were ever meant to carry alone. You did not wake up to nothing this morning, however empty or uneventful it may have felt in that first quiet moment before you got out of bed. You woke up in the middle of a story already in motion, news already delivered, simply still traveling the distance between where it started and where you are standing right now. Rest in this today, fully and completely, without reservation. What was prayed for you has already been answered, dispatched the moment it was needed, and it is closer to arriving than this ordinary morning has allowed you to believe possible.